For me, it's looking back on what you've done, what the challenges have been, how you've worked through it. Sometimes you're still dealing with the aftermath, but it's about how you improve, and then you draw upon that experience in the future. Ensure that you don't make that error again, and if you do, that again, you learn from it.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Spring and summer are all about outdoor events, carnivals and concerts, with events on a large scale back on after a few years of upheaval. What does it take to deliver top shelf events for large amounts of people? Josh Pelham is the executive chef overseeing Flemington Racecourse for Crown Resorts. Josh, how are you?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Huck. How are you?
I'm good. It's good to get you on the show. You've just had a pretty big spring carnival with the Melbourne Cup. How has it been?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Listen, it's been pretty full on. Obviously, with the takeover and Crown Resorts now running their catering cross course at Flemington, it's created a great opportunity for myself and Crown to really showcase what we can do in the event space.
Give us a sense of what you did over the Melbourne Cup and the extent of the catering that you did.
Yeah, look, we were catering for up to 41,000 plated meals at its peak. And that's not including all the retail offerings and also some of the grazing. So as you can imagine, it's a huge beast. And the logistics and the coordination play a really important role to be able to deliver to that scale.
Take us into a day and sort of what it took and how many people and what you were dishing up.
Yeah, look, I'd like to say it's glamorous, as much as it might sound like it's glamorous, but it's certainly a lot of hard work. And from the outside looking in, it can seem like an easy job, but also you have to be very brave to do it. My day would start by waking up at 2:30 in the morning to drag myself out of bed, jump in the shower, and then luckily I was fortunate enough to get a hotel room at the end of Epsom Road here, just by the front gates of the racecourse. So that was very nice of my employer to do that for me, to ensure that I was here on time, because otherwise I would be leaving the Mornington Peninsula even earlier. And look, once I got on course, you really have to start going through the motions. Obviously, there's a few other people here, so we probably had about 8 people on at that time. And that delivery window starts between sort of 3 and finishes at 7:30 in the morning, where we go into lockdown and no one can get in. So you have to coordinate your deliveries accordingly. And at this time, we have 2 semi-trailers of sandwiches that, we are helped prepared off-site that come in just for the sheer volume. We obviously couldn't do that on-site ourselves for a normal race day, as opposed to on a normal race day where we do prepare a lot of those things ourselves.
41,000 plated meals in a day is extraordinary. Give us a sense of maybe sort of what you were serving.
Look, the brief that I was given and the food style that I have anyways is I'll work backwards from what's the dish that I want to do, and then work out how we achieve that at scale. Now, obviously, sometimes there has to be some compromises along the way, but the style of food that we're doing is, modern, contemporary, and unlike food that's sort of been served here on scale before.
Tell us about some of the dishes that you created.
Some of the dishes that we created, look, we offered a diverse, wide-ranging scale of offerings, from fine dining through to plated grazing on the table, cocktail, 5-course degustation, 6-course degustation. So it was a wide-reaching demographic. But for me, I think some of the biggest successes was that real casual style of dining, where a dish comes to the table, or 4 dishes comes to the table at once, and you just sort of graze and share and spend that time with friends socializing, as opposed to sometimes the stuffiness of a degustation can be quite challenging for other people on the table.
What was it like putting together such a huge event, given the last couple of years and the fact that these sort of things didn't happen in many places? What was it like?
Yeah, look, putting this event together, obviously Crown is a new partner with VRC, and we didn't have that history of the knowledge, I guess the inside knowledge of how a major event like this works. So that presented obviously its own challenges. But I guess that we just took the approach of using our experience collectively amongst the senior leaders, and then really going through the motions step by step about how we can methodically work through these challenges and how we will execute them.
Take us back to when you were young. What sort of role did food play in your family?
Yeah, look, for me, food was always a way of expressing yourself, your creativity, being able to do something that's very unique that other people struggle to do even when they're an adult. So I guess in my younger years, that was really something that I enjoyed doing. I guess you could call it showing off a little bit, but, I really enjoyed the journey of learning the camaraderie of the kitchen and the environment. I mean, I started my apprenticeship Mateo's and then moved to Phoenix with Gary, Megan, George Columbaris and Raymond Capaldi. And that's where I really sort of cut my teeth and made the commitment to the industry. And once you make that commitment and you're prepared to do what it takes to be able to get to the top, then that's when you really start to excel.
Take us back into the kitchen with Gary and George, and do you have any stories of what it was like working with them?
None that I think that I would be able to share too widely on air. But look, those guys really inspired me. They came from Michelin star restaurants in Europe, right? They had Le Restaurant, 3-hat restaurant at the Sofitel at the time. George went and opened Reserve. There was a buzz, there was a feel, don't get me wrong, it was bloody hard work. At Phoenix we'd set up and we'd do 150 for breakfast out of the same kitchen that we would then do 150 in the cafe and 70 in the restaurant out of the one kitchen, just sort of turning it over. And that in itself creates challenges, especially on a Sunday morning when everyone's a bit hungover or a bit tired at the end of the week, right?
You spent a lot of time in various stints in the UK. What was it like when you first went over there, and how did you get your foot in the door?
Look, I guess the desire came from developed whilst working at Phoenix about I want to commit to the industry, so how do I do that? How do I be the best that I can be, right? At the time, everyone was going to London, everyone was going overseas, and so for me, that just seemed like naturally the right way to go. I decided that I was going to go to London. I didn't end up leaving. I had 3 leaving parties, so by the time I actually left Australia, I landed in London with £500 in my pocket, and anyone that's lived there would know that doesn't go very far. Luckily, I had an uncle that lived in High Barnet at the time, which is the very end of the Northern Line. So you're looking at about an hour and a half to 2 hours on the tube to get to Mayfair, and then I'd heard about a restaurant called The Square, and The Square, for those that would be aware, is an institution that has bred many great chefs like Scott Pickett, Stuart McFay, Brett Graham. A real university for young cooks that wanted to grow and really commit to the industry. And it was hard graft, but rewarding at the same time. You started at the bottom and you worked your way up. And I remember, being in the back of the kitchen, my job every day was make bread, make ice creams, and dice fruit. And I did that for the first 7 months. Right? So you can imagine, the frustration. And, there was one day where I was like, you know what, fuck this, I'm leaving. And I sort of grabbed my shit and I walked out. And then I reflected upon a time when I was younger and I went for my first job. I was at a pizza shop, and I walked up to it and I got really nervous. 14, 9 months, never had a job before. Walked up, and I got really nervous and I walked away and I said, you know what, fuck it, just give it a go. What's the worst thing that's going to happen? And I walked in and I got the job, and then I was there for a few months. And I sort of reflected on that when I had walked out of the square at that time, and I was like, you know what, you've come this far. Now's the time to commit. And it was a real turning point, I think, for me. After that, I started flying, getting onto the fish garnish and the meat garnish, and then the kitchen was broken down into those types of sections: cold starters, hot starters, fish, meat, and then you do the pass.
Philip Howard has influenced so many chefs. Do you have any stories of what it was like working with him and the influence?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing that I picked up from Phil and Robert Weston, who was his head chef for 16 years, is just be fucking genuine, right? Like, just be genuine with people, and that's how you gain the respect. If you play games and you mislead, or you don't tell the truth, or you don't be honest, then that's not the way to be successful. Just be genuine, just be yourself. I remember turbot coming in at 10:30 in the morning, and Phil just filleting it directly on the bench because we needed it for lunch. No board, nothing, just straight on the bench, just filleting the fish for lunch. And it's like, this is a 2 Michelin star restaurant, and there's this great chef just filleting the fish directly on the stainless steel bench. But that was classic Phil, just an absolute character, and someone who I've used as a mentor for my entire life.
After that, you sort of did a detour and spent a bit of time on yachts and in some luxury resorts. So what spawned that?
Yeah, I think just a desire to. I think the penny really dropped that I'd been in London for like 5 years, and I actually hadn't left London. I'd only been in London. I'd only worked. I'd only partied. I'd only had friends there. So time to go out and explore whilst I have the opportunity, and then. So the opportunity then came. First step was getting to Chamonix, where I managed a high-profile group of individual chalets. And, that in itself had its challenges, transferring guests, doing breakfast, lunch and dinner, afternoon teas, and all those types of odd jobs. But it was definitely a rewarding in the fact that you met lots of people in different scenarios, but also you could let your hair down and have a good time. I remember getting locked up by the gendarmerie because I was attempted to drive. And I had guests the next day, and I convinced the gendarme that I needed to go back to my chalet to get my asthma puffer, so I could let my mate know that I was actually going to be locked up overnight, and he had to look after the guests for breakfast in the morning. Yeah. I mean, they're just like, they're the life sort of stories that you develop, right?
You ended up spending a bit of time at the French Laundry as well. How different was that compared to the experiences you'd had?
Yeah, look, to get to that point, though, Huck, it's really important to highlight that I then moved from Chamonix down to the boats, to the super yachts in the south of France, and one of the charter guests was Thomas Keller, right? And I just had his book, Under Pressure, and I sort of created the opportunity, I guess, where I invited him down to the galley. He wanted to cook a couple of dishes and stuff, so I got every baby vegetable, every micro herb, every piece of foie gras, the best produce, just so that he had a selection, because he didn't actually give me a list of what he wanted. And I gave him my apron and gave him my knives and set him up a board. Just went over the top, but that's what the sort of stuff that you would do at the square, right? For Phil or Rob or your sous chef, you would do that. You would dice the butter, you would de-seed the lemon wedges for the lemon juice for the fish. So I'd do all that, and I had my CV in the front cover of his Under Pressure book, and I said, "Would you mind signing this?" And so, as you can imagine, the CV fell out, and we started chatting, and he said, "Let me see what I can do." And that's one thing led to another. After 12 months, I ended up landing in the French Laundry, and what a great experience. I remember picking up the French Laundry cookbook, the original one, in culinary school, going, "Wow, this is the best food in the world," and here I was sitting at the French Laundry at 5 o'clock in the morning, raising the American flag. setting up the kitchens for the chefs. And I guess that's really where I sort of learnt that you don't need to be an asshole to everyone to get what you want done. Like it's more challenging to work through the problems in a respectful way, I guess, as opposed to just yelling and screaming and calling people names. That's kind of the UK mentality. Whereas in America, for me, my experience at the French Laundry was very different. I guess after leaving the French Laundry, I had the opportunity to sort of weigh up which direction I want to go, and I found a sort of a happy medium. You don't need to be like that all the time, but when you do kick off, people respond more than if you're kicking off all the time.
This episode is proudly supported by Montague, handpicked for you.
The things that we're really looking for in plums, first of all, they've got to be sweet. We're really looking for a full flavour explosion in our plums. Red flesh is critically important to us, higher in antioxidants, so all that good stuff. And then we're also looking at a slightly firmer texture. So there's almost a little crunch. That's the real driver for us.
For more information, go to montague.com.au.
What brought you back to Australia?
Look, I think a desire to go home for a bit. I hadn't been home for a number of years. And I found myself working at the press club as a sous chef with Joe Grabak and George Columbaris again. Obviously, we had a good relationship. And that sort of lasted sort of 6 to 8 months. And then, bit of a love story, but I met my now wife at the press club, and she was going overseas. I'd only been back for 3 months, and she was going to the UK. So I have a UK passport, and I was like, sure, why not? So, I went chasing her around the world, and it's paid off.
You made your way back after that tour at some stage. Where did you find your roots and sort of start building your career back in Australia?
Yeah, look, after being in the UK for a number of years, back working with Phil and opening Kitchen W8, where we got a Michelin star in the first year, I landed back in Australia and hooked up with Scott Pickett. We have had a friendship before I left, and obviously the blood that runs through Square trained chefs is very thick, and we stick together and we tend to look after each other when everyone needs it. I sort of called him and said, "How you going? I'm coming back," and we sort of teed something up, and I ended up landing at Estelle Bar Kitchen when the pink tiles were on the wall still. So that was the first incarnation of Estelle, and that's where Scott and I really developed our relationship, I guess, and I ended up being with Scotty for about 4 years, I think.
Scott's a bit of a legend of the Australian dining scene. Do you have any stories of what it's like working with him and the impact he had on you?
Yeah, he runs at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and if you don't keep up, you get left behind. In a nutshell.
You mentioned the Mornington Peninsula a little bit earlier, but you've had a connection there, opening a venue down there. Tell us a bit about that.
Yeah, look, after working with Scott for so long, we had spent time together opening restaurants. I was there when we moved from, same business, but new restaurant launch from Estelle Bar Kitchen to just Estelle. A bit of a makeover. The pink tiles came off the wall, and there was no refurb to the kitchen, but the dining room got done and a bigger PDR upstairs. And then St. Crispin obviously came on the scene, and then the second-hand clothing store next to Estelle became available, and this was Scott's dream to open his own fine diner and really go for it. So we went through the motions of, demoing the inside, taking it over, building the dream kitchen. And for those that have been there would know what I'm talking about. You got this beautiful island kitchen in the middle of the dining room. I actually think the kitchen's bigger than the dining room. With all the firepower you need to do, 1,000 covers. But Scott wanted to really push the envelope, and we opened ESP. And from that, obviously other opportunities came where we were doing the tennis and private events, and his business and profile really started to grow. I sort of felt as though I needed a break, and I wanted to continue growing my skill set. But restaurants, I felt as though I had reached the limit at that point in time, and an opportunity presented itself to open the RACV Cape Shank Resort. Now, when I got told about RACV, I didn't know that they had resorts or a leisure portfolio or multiple hotels around Australia. So it was a pretty exciting journey to go on, from a sandstone building, conference building, clubhouse, to a 5-story architecturally designed hotel with 200 rooms. In the first 12 months, it was a steep learning curve. Not are you only a chef who creates food, but you're also a counsellor, you're also an accountant, you're also a procurement officer, you're also a food safety officer. So, the responsibilities grew. And, I think that a true reflection of what effort was put in was shown through, we received 5-star hotel rating for our food and beverage operations, and also a chef's hat in the Good Foods Guide.
What's the approach with a venue like that, a resort? Do you treat the food and restaurant differently to a standalone restaurant?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is you have to remember the demographic, right? So you're catering for people that are there on their 85th wedding anniversary. You're catering for a family of 4 who are on a family vacation. You're catering for the couple that just got married or are on a first date. Right? So there's such a diverse range of people dining there that you can't sort of pigeonhole every menu to suit what you think is the best food. You have to understand the market, make sure that you're catering to everybody, review the feedback, take it seriously, look for consistencies on how you can improve. But at the same time, if you have a signature restaurant, that's where you focus your energy on doing what you love and being creative. But, circling back to what I currently doing at Flemington, it trickles down from that restaurant into, the conferencing and the event space where you're doing 6, 7, 1,200 people. That food and that philosophy trickles down through that cuisine as well. It's not just locked into, steak, mash, green beans and sauce.
How did you make the move into sort of the racing world and catering for such large numbers?
I did before I took the job at Cape Shank, and after leaving Scott, I did a brief stint at Melbourne Racing Club, and that was a casual role that I was doing, just as sort of a stopgap. And I really enjoyed the environment and the challenges, and also I guess there's a little bit of work-life balance there as well. You still do large-scale events and catering and race days, but it's not like a hotel 24/7 breakfast, lunch and dinner and overnight room service that you're worrying about, and the breakfast chef is sick and then you have to go in and do a triple shift. There's different pressures and different considerations.
Tell us about first starting that and the sort of events that were the challenges in sort of when you first sort of got your foot in the door with the racing?
COVID. I literally started, when was it, 21? Yeah, 21. So, we were in the midst of second COVID lockdowns. We'd done a couple of race days, smaller race days, but then we got locked down again. What that looks like, at the racetrack, we didn't have a huge amount of full-timers, so I guess there wasn't that pressure of dealing with the HR perspective too much, but we had to, like everyone, pivot into boxes, putting food in boxes, and how can we have an offering for our members, and also, the racing audience that still want to have that special experience, because we were fortunate enough to continue racing through the lockdowns.
Throughout your career, you've won so many different awards and had so many different acknowledgements. Well, what sort of impact have they had on sort of the trajectory of your career?
Yeah, Huck, look, for me, I think that it's super important that once you make that decision to commit to the industry, right, that you have to be prepared to put yourself out there, and you have to be prepared to take the criticism, right? Because it's not always all positive. You don't always win the competition the first time that you do it. But you give it another crack next year and you improve, right? And I think that that's part of being a successful chef, and putting yourself on TV. You're putting yourself out there to be criticised by the public, right? No matter who you are, and some people like it and some people don't, and it's how you deal with those things. And I think that that's really character building, and it's really important.
Tell me a little bit about your food. I know you spoke of the 41,000 plated meals in a day at the Melbourne Cup and things like that, but what's your approach to cookery, and where does your food lie?
Look, I always remember what Phil sort of taught me, and it's like, make sure it just tastes fucking delicious. Whatever's on the plate, make sure it's nice, right? And then you make it pretty, right? And then you strip it back, and then you look at how you can present it in a modern or contemporary way. I think that I like to use native influences where we can, and sort of a contemporary sort of French style, I guess. But for me, it's really about just trying to pare it back when it's on a plate. There's no need to do sort of 13, 14 touches these days.
Is there a dish that stands out for you that you created for this year's event that you could sort of break down and tell us about?
This year's event, look, it's very different in this world about doing a dish that's super, super creative. I've always had a steak tartare on the menu, with beautiful sort of charcoal roasted and pickled radicchio, with a cashew cream, rye berries and smoked beetroot. So it's always a nice little entree that I like to roll out whenever I get the opportunity.
Given the huge success this year of the catering that you did, what are your plans for next year? Do you see some opportunities?
Yeah, look, I think there's definitely opportunity to improve, always. And look, I'm really enjoying the challenges of day to day of running this scale business. I don't think that there's many other businesses that could offer these type of challenges. Being obviously internationally known is a real sort of driver for me to keep pushing and keep doing what I do, and just creating a positive working environment and a positive culture with the team.
Well, you're doing amazing things down there. What do you love about what you do?
Look, for me, it's looking back on what you've done, what the challenges have been, how you've worked through it. Sometimes you're still dealing with the aftermath, but it's about how you improve, and then you draw upon that experience in the future to really ensure that you don't make that error again. And if you do that, again, you learn from it. But obviously you don't want to make that same mistake too many times.
Well, Josh, congratulations on what you're building there, and I look forward to seeing what you do in the coming year. Please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon.
Absolutely. Thanks, mate.
This is the Deep in the Weeds podcast. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we take a deep dive into the lives of the incredible people who ply their trade in the food and hospitality sector. Special thanks to executive producer Rob Locke for making this all happen. Follow us on Instagram at Deep in the Weeds Podcast, or email us at podcast@deepintheweeds.com.au. Stay safe and be well.